Midweek Pictorial, June 24, 1920. Warren G. Harding, Republican nominee for president, on the golf links at Washington. He is extremely fond of dogs and is caressing one of his favorites. He is an enthusiastic golfer and finds his chief relaxation in that sport. Senator Harding is fond of cigarettes and makes no apologies for it. He is here shown enjoying one at the entrance to his residence in the cool of the early morning. The maid of the Harding family, Inez McWhirter, at right, and her bosom friend, Hattie Jeffries, who cooks at the Siamese legation on the same block in Washington. Inez shouted from the back porch when the news came, "My man's got it." Harding residence in Washington, unpretentious but ideally situated, at 2314 Wyoming Avenue, within 3 blocks of the Connecticut Avenue Bridge, near the deep, cool canyon which that structure spans. Senator Harding bought the house 3 years ago. Mrs. Warren G. Harding, wife of the Republican nominee, who may be the first lady in the land. She was Miss Florence Kling of Marion, Ohio, and was married to Mr. Harding July 8, 1891. She has no children. One of the penalties of fame is the necessity of being photographed, and Governor Coolidge, Republican nominee for vice president, is undergoing the ordeal, standing on lower step of State House, Boston. Family circle of Governor Coolidge. The governor is seated, with Mrs. Coolidge, their 2 boys, and the governor's father standing. Mrs. Coolidge was Miss Grace A. Goodhue of Burlington, Vermont. She was married to Mr. Coolidge in 1906. The home life of the Coolidges is very happy and devoid of all ostentation. Double house at Northampton, Massachusetts, half of which is occupied by Governor Coolidge. He pays $32 a month rent, and when the news of his nomination was brought to him, he humorously expressed the fear that now the landlord might raise it to $35. The governor lives comfortably, but with extreme simplicity. He has never owned an automobile, nor does he own any real estate. While in Boston, he has a single room in a small hotel, returning to Northampton for the weekends. A vigorous follow-through by Senator Harding on the golf links at Washington. That the cares of state do not wholly engross the presidential candidate is shown by his evident enjoyment of the sport. Senator Warren G. Harding of Ohio, Republican nominee for President of the United States, being congratulated by Will Hayes, chairman of the National Republican Committee, after the vote had been announced. Ruin left in wake of cloudburst and overflow of the River Ludd at Louth, Lincolnshire, England. On this site stood the fire station of the town. It was utterly destroyed. The disaster took place on the night of May 29th to 30th, 1920. It is attributed to a cloudburst in the woods nearby that caused the waters of the River Ludd to rise so rapidly that it engulfed part of the town. Desolated section of Louth, where the flood did great damage. The water spread so rapidly that houses in the low-lying part of the town were immediately engulfed in a rush which carried away bridges, fences, trees, and other obstacles. Over a score of people lost their lives. In many cases, the weight of the water prevented the opening of doors, or otherwise many persons would have reached a place of safety. The torrent was 200 feet wide and speedily swept over the lower parts of houses. Remains of a row of cottages at Louth after the water had receded. The waves swept on their crests portions of demolished cottages, automobiles, wagons, furniture, uprooted trees, and the bodies of drowned animals. Bridges crumbled before the rushing flood. So sudden was the approach of the waters that a majority of the deaths occurred during the first moments of the flood, when the lower rooms of the houses were swamped. In the higher places of the town, many persons escaped, but only after wading waist deep through the water. one end of Carlisle Bridge in the city of Londonderry, Ireland, which was held by masked men who were supporting the police during the recent disorders that convulsed the city. Detective Sergeant Maroney was shot dead there. British soldiers marching through a street in the Irish capital. The number of troops has been greatly increased of late, and it is estimated that fully 60,000 are now distributed at strategic points of the troubled and restless country. Military Guard in Carlisle Road, Derry, Ireland. There have been especially acute disturbances at this place, and bloody clashes have occurred between Unionists and Sinn Féiners. For nearly a week, a veritable reign of terror existed, especially at night, when riotous crowds assembled and practically took possession of the city. Armed soldiers lining the gangways of the SS Anna Durrell Boog of London while munitions of war were being discharged. The troubles of the British government have been increased by the refusal of dockers and railwaymen to handle war munitions. Affairs in Ireland, instead of becoming better, are growing steadily worse. The policy of sending troops in increasing numbers into the country is showing no sign of relaxation. Blockhouses and fenced-in districts are being arranged for in those sections where the spirit of revolt flames most fiercely. Cavalry has been added to the infantry in order to permit more rapid movement in the case of threatened points. The attacks on barracks and the killing of policemen show no diminution. In some cases, small forces of soldiers have been stopped by mobs in the public street and their weapons taken from them, while an unfriendly multitude looked on with hoots of derision. Photo caption: Armored car on patrol in the streets of Derry. The men are fully equipped and ready for instant action. Martial law has been threatened, but has not yet actually been declared. Dockers watching the engineers working a complicated crane on a platform 200 feet high. The dockers had refused to handle munitions, and the army engineers were called in to take their places. San Francisco Civic Auditorium, where the Democratic National Convention will meet June 28th. It was erected at a cost of $1 million and will seat from 12,000 to 15,000 people. The bullet of the assassin claimed another victim on June 13th, when Essad Pasha, the principal figure in Albanian affairs, was shot in Paris, whither he had gone on a political mission. The perpetrator of this deed was a young Albanian student who was arrested and held for trial. Essad Pasha was a man of marked ability as a military leader and as a civil executive and administrator, and his sudden taking off is a misfortune for his country. Albania has maintained its independence hitherto, and proposes to do so in the future. Italy wants Avlona, but the final decision of the peace conference has not been announced. Photo caption: Essad Pasha, Albanian leader who was assassinated in Paris June 13th, where he had gone on a mission connected with the interests of his country. The assassin was a student belonging to a revolutionary clique. Essad Pasha had helped the Serbians during the retreat before the German invasion, and had favored the Allied cause. Scutari, a city of Albania on the river Bojana, 16 miles from the Adriatic. It has a strong fortress, which was captured by the Montenegrins in the Balkan War. At that time, it was defended by Essad Pasha, who has just been assassinated in Paris. Albanian soldiers, who make up in picturesqueness of attire what they lack in uniformity. Their chins and heads are clothed in Turkish fashion, and they have umbrellas, which are rendered necessary by the heavy rains that prevail in Albania. Memorial service held at the island of Isla, where hundreds of American soldiers and sailors who perished in the sinkings of the Tuscania and Otranto were buried. 387 graves are here located, each decorated reverently with the American flag. Here at Kilhoman is a small God's Acre, where 10 Americans who were washed ashore after the Tuscania disaster were buried. The Tuscania was attacked February 5, 1918 by a submarine and sunk. 2,179 Americans were on board, of whom several hundred lost their lives. Many of the bodies drifted ashore at the place shown and were buried with military honors. Participants in the memorial services at Kilchoman on the anniversary of the sinkings of the Tuscania and Otranto. Reverend Donald Grant of the parish of Kilchoman made the principal address. Marshal Pétain and Ambassador Hugh Wallace as they appeared together at the Memorial Day services at Solesmes in the vicinity of Paris. American dead are buried there in large numbers, and the services that were held there on Memorial Day were very impressive. Flags and flowers were there in profusion. Colossal statue erected at Solesmes as a tribute to the American soldiers who fell in the war. Its size is indicated by comparison with the men standing at its flower-bestrewn base. General Montjean, the victor of Soissons, laying a wreath at the foot of an American flag in the American cemetery at Plessis, near Soissons, where thousands of our dead are buried. Repairing airplane after forced landing in a swamp. The mishap occurred to Charles Cummings and Robert Harris, who were flying from Philadelphia to their home at Malden, Massachusetts. While at a height of 5,000 feet, engine trouble developed, and they were forced down to a swamp at Secaucus, New Jersey. Neither was hurt. Junker-type all-metal air limousine at Ballin Field, Washington. The passenger compartment, which is equipped with the comforts and luxuries of a modern Pullman, is designed for 4 passengers. The plane is said to have made a trip from Atlantic City to Philadelphia and return with passengers at a cost of $3. John Larson is owner and builder. Flag Day celebration at the base of the Statue of Liberty, Bedloes Island, New York, June 14, 1920. More than 2,000 children were carried to the island in special boats and passed the day in games and merrymaking, together with ceremonies in honor of the flag. The statue itself was decorated with long lines of flags and bunting. Polish Liberty Loan campaign in full swing in the New England states, where a great number of Poles are employed in manufacturing establishments. A parade to help the cause along is here shown in Boston. The purpose of the loan is to help the new republic to finance its needs in this trying period following the war. The ancients and honorables holding their annual drumhead election in Boston. The election is held in the open air, and strict observance is paid to time-honored forms. The Ancient and Honorable Artillery is a Boston organization that dates back for generations, and membership in which is regarded as an honor. Heaviest gun in the world, and the first wire-wound 16-inch rifle ever made in the United States. It can hurl a 2,400-pound projectile 31 miles. It will be used in coast defense work. Power room of the world's largest motor ship, the Africa, built for the Great East Asiatic Line of Copenhagen. She has no steam boilers or steam equipment of any kind on board. She is propelled by motors using crude oil fuel. The Constantine, a great gas and oil well that has recently been brought in at El Dorado, Arkansas. It is supposed to be blowing off about 50 million feet of gas daily. It first began to blow on April 22nd, and the force was so great that it was not till June 4th that it was successfully capped and controlled. Striking upheaval of water, sand, and gas at El Dorado, Arkansas, in a stream about a quarter of a mile from the big gas well. The whole district seems rich in oil and gas.